Well, hello everyone. That was a Power Pack session by Manpreet on Power Platform. Do check it out. There's so much goodness that is coming out with Power Platform, and especially with the AI capabilities that you have in there. So this is another session on AI for those who are at any role in an AI team. You might be a product manager, a designer, a practitioner, a developer, a tester, or someone who's just interested in learning how to build responsible and ethical and trustworthy AI solutions. This is hopefully a good session for you. My name is Liji Thomas. I'm a Microsoft MVP in artificial intelligence. And my topic for today is to introduce you to the HAX Toolkit. This is a practical toolkit that will give you guidelines and patterns and real world examples of how to create human-centered AI experiences. So we'll move us along. A quick word of thanks to our sponsors, without whom we could not have made this conference a success. So thank you, our sponsors, and let's dive right in. Alrighty. I love this quote by one of my favorite authors, Stephen Covey. And obviously, he did not have artificial intelligence in mind when he said this, but I would love to borrow it towards that. We judge ourselves by our intentions and we judge others by the actions that they take. In all my years of experience in artificial intelligence and all, I started in the world of AI way before Gen AI and before AI was a cool kid on the block, I guess. But in all those years, it's always been talks about responsible AI. It's probably used so much in our space. There's never been a question on the why. I've never been challenged on why should you be responsible in the way that you build AI solutions. Not once. No customer, no client, no one ever has said, oh, I doubt if you should be building or spending a lot of time building responsible, trustworthy applications. So there's no question on the why per se. But here's the thing. Intent alone will not do. In responsible AI, intent isn't enough. Without action, harm can occur. Trust will erode and technology risks being misused. So we judge ourselves thinking we're going to create great solutions, do right by the users of the solution, but we cannot absolve ourselves of the reality that the same technology, AI, can be used in so many different ways, and some of which can be dangerous. For example, if you consider facial recognition, that technology is used for hiring tools, it can be used for deepfakes, it can be used for mass surveillance. So the dual use nature of the same technology, the fact that it can be used for good as well as harm, is something for us to consider when we work in the space. So how does this matter? AI should benefit the users. It should be designed with people in mind. And the how of AI development matters as much as what we build. So this toolkit that we are going to explore today helps us in that conversation, how to build AI in a human-centered way. It ties all technical decisions that we make back to the user's needs. It ensures that we involve diverse perspectives throughout, early and throughout the conversation. And one of my favorite things is it plans for failures. Design AI systems so users can recover when things go wrong, because it is only a matter of when more than if that an AI system will not go per what it has been instructed to do. So bear that in mind, let's dive in to what the HAX Toolkit is. So Microsoft has developed this toolkit called HAX. It is a set of tools for creating responsible and human-centered AI experiences. It helps AI practitioners incorporate ethical considerations into design. The way it will support AI practitioners like you to build responsibility is in a couple of ways. One, it provides frameworks, tools, and guidelines for ethical AI development. And it's not just literature. It's not just read these articles and figure a way out. You will see specific tactical guidance on what to do and what not to do. Encourages accountability and transparency in the AI systems. It promotes awareness of unintended consequences, because here's the whole space in the space of AI, we call it the unknown unknowns. We don't know what we don't know. And unless we proactively and intentionally and deliberately make time to talk and reflect and think about these in advance, we might be in for surprises. And there's a lot of talk, a lot of theory around building secure and scalable and responsible AI solutions, and very rarely practical guidance around how to really do this. And there really aren't a lot of tools or techniques, so to speak, for practitioners to design AI systems. Some of this talk might look like it's more centered for design folks. I would encourage everyone, including engineers, to take part in this conversation, because it takes a village to raise a child. And having a holistic, a well-rounded and a diverse perspective going into the building of your AI solution will show in the end product someday. So let me show you some of the tools that are a part of the HAX Toolkit. By the way, HAX is an acronym for Human AI Experience Toolkit. And I will say this has been in existence way before the whole Gen AI boom with ChatGPT and all. I've talked about HAX even before that era at all. I think it's critical even now as we build Gen AI solutions and assistants that we can borrow a lot from this tool and see how we can develop responsible AI solutions. So some of the tools that we have as part of the HAX Toolkit are these. One, we have guidelines for human AI interaction. Bulk of this session will be talking about these guidelines. It's a very nicely placed deck of cards, if I may, and those cards will show you how to think through, when to think through certain things in your AI journey. The next part is the HAX Design Library. Again, very useful tool for putting some of these in action. The HAX Design Library contains more detailed examples of putting these interactions. I have probably a couple of examples in this session, but you will find so many different examples if you look at the HAX Design Library. The workbook is the most interesting piece, where you would bring together your team of all your roles on the team would sit down and based on all the guidelines and the examples that you see in Design Library, make it real for your specific use case. Okay, which of these designs make sense for us? Which of these guidelines is applicable for us? How do we lay it out in an actual Excel workbook that you can actually put all of these into as well? And then you have a playbook which shows some of these put together for one or two paradigms. Again, in the interest of time, we might not have time to go through all of these. I'll focus on the first part, the first component of the toolkit. And someday we will walk through 2 and 3 and 4, but we'll touch upon all the 4 so you have the resource links as well at the end of the deck. All righty. So let's dive in. The first tool or the component, as I said, the guidelines for the human AI interaction. Right? So when you think about human AI interaction, there are so many levels at which you can think about the humans and the AI interacting. The bulk of our interaction experience today is usually in that second layer during the interaction. But if you kind of think about it, there is work that needs to happen even before someone starts interacting with a human. There is work that needs to happen after someone has interacted and has left the conversation as well. And most importantly, that third layer, when something has gone wrong inadvertently or inevitably, right? So this is all the 18, 19 guidelines that we have. That's all laid out there for you. The first, if you see, it's categorized. There are specific categories of colors of these cards. The first two, the blue colored card, this is about setting expectations at the beginning about what a system can do and how well it can do it. Again, we'll go into detail for each of these. The red set of cards is about what happens during the interaction. And even in that, cards 3 and 4 is about guidelines asking us to take into consideration the user's immediate context, like consider the user's location, the task that the user is doing, things like that. 5 and 6 is more about asking us to consider the social norms, the larger, the broader context or the bigger pictures. The 7, 8, and 9, those are guidelines that prescribe what to do when the AI system is wrong. For example, even if the system produces a false positive, we look at examples of that. What do we do in such situations? Examples 10, 11, those are guidelines that advise what to do when the system is uncertain. One of the falsies that we have is we typically design AI systems only for the happy path, assuming everything is going to line up and it's going to work exactly as we designed. Seldom does that happen in the practical world. So we should be ready for curveballs when AI gets it wrong, when AI is not very sure about the end result, when it's uncertain. In some cases, it might even end up taking the wrong action, which is way more costly than even taking partial action. So these guidelines will tell us what to do when the system is uncertain. The last set of green guidelines, the 12, 13, and 14, it tells us how the system should behave over time. So let's say a person has interacted with an AI system, has left it, packed up, and gone home, and still they advise us to remember and learn from those experiences, maybe not make as many disruptive changes while the user is away, because the user will have to adapt to a changed system later. So it's a very interesting set of topics. But before we dive into that, you might be thinking, where is this coming from? Should I trust this? What credibility does this have? And then who built all of this? And why should I be using this, right? So a little bit of background and context into where this is actually coming from. So the guidelines for human AI interaction was actually set up in way back in 2019. The way Microsoft had created this is over several layers or several phases, so to speak. In the first phase, the research had consolidated over 150 plus recommendations across the board on what this should be. Phase 2, there was a lot of team evaluation. Phase 3, again, further user evaluation. And phase 4, there was expert reviews that were done. And this was a paper that was published by Microsoft that received a lot of accolades. And this is out there for you, for your pleasure reading. Still out there for you to be able to dive deeper into where these guidelines came from. This extensive research that was done by the Microsoft team, the output of which you and I are going to look at today in terms of the guidelines for human AI interaction. It is very crisp and concise and very clearly put out in the form of playing cards, but there's a huge lot of effort and research that has gone into the making of this deck. So a couple of disclaimers, because I've had these questions asked in the past. Are these guidelines a checklist of things that we have to do for all our AI solutions? Probably not. I wouldn't consider it as a checklist. You should be looking at a guideline as a guideline. You would take inspiration from this. You would consider them during development. And honestly, you would have way more guidelines that you would want to bring in to building your AI solutions as well. And this should not be an all-encompassing list. Another question I get is, isn't this important for all systems? Sure. This is applicable for AI systems, non-AI systems, but I think specifically in the interest of what we are discussing and where the sort of the world is headed, this is way more important right now for AI solutions and in the face of AI uncertainties. So with that, again, I'll also say this is common, or these are good examples or guidelines that are applicable for a lot of AI-based products. Excuse me. And this is applicable for irrespective of whatever kind of AI product that you are creating. You might be creating a chatbot, an assistant-based application. You could be creating an AI search engine, an AI social network. You could be even using AI features as part of a full stack product like your email or sort. But wherever AI is being used, you could apply these guidelines to it. So with that context, coming back into the guidelines itself, and let's dive a little deeper into this. Now we look at each of these guidelines, these cards, these sections. So let's start with the first two. These are guidelines that we should be applying before the AI interaction or the user starts interacting with the AI system. Now, let's keep it very simple, right? If you want to consider that with what you are maybe familiar with in terms of, let's take a search engine kind of a use case. So, studies have found that even though search engines have been around for quite a long time, there are a lot of people who don't really understand how search engines work. They don't know, for example, they don't understand how much content is actually available on the web. They think everything in the world is there on the web. All the knowledge in the world is available on the web. Well, a lot of it is, but I wouldn't think that everything is there on the web, which is why we always say, like, don't trust everything that you read on the internet. Most also don't understand how search engines work or what the quality of the return results will be. There's a good percentage of people who still say it is magic. That might be fairly familiar, especially those in the AI space as well. So you may be thinking it's just search, it's not a high stakes scenario. Why bother? Like, it's not a big deal. But let's say you walk into your doctor's office, and if your doctor searches for something using consumer search engines, instead of a medical directory or of sorts, I think you will start to feel a little concerned about it. So it's important for us, the AI practitioners, to set the right expectations with the users, when something should be used, when it should not be used, and along those lines. So you get the idea. So the way that, if you remember, if you connect that to the same search engine concept here, this is what we just discussed right now, set the right expectations, like what can you do? So you would look around for documentation of what is in the news. There are ways in which the search engines have been able to say this without putting out a documentation per se, if I may. So there are ways in which they would introduce features at the appropriate time, show examples, give people enough information and enough time to be able to say to that. So the same paradigm can be applied to AI as well. So let's say you are building a generative AI assistant, and the Gen AI assistant, you could use the same principles to be able to drive these conversations. For example, the first card there says, make clear what the system can do. That card says, let's say if you had to apply that to a chatbot or a Gen AI assistant, here's how I would use it. It would be a welcome message with capabilities. And if you use some of the really good chatbots, you would see this in action. It would display a short introduction like, I can help with booking meetings, summarizing documents, and answering product questions. Like, who am I? I will help you with your travel recommendations, or I will help you with finding XYZ. That's a very good example of making clear what the system can do. It's not just a hi or a welcome message. You must be very clear with what the system can do. Well, even after you do that, there's nothing stopping from person from asking you what the weather is. But there's so much that we have to do and we can do. It could also start with, giving them some prompts, what we call like pre-canned commands from the top, say examples like summarize this PDF or explain this concept. So find recent updates or ways in which examples of prompts or questions that you can potentially ask us. If there is user inactivity for some time, you can also have them send you gentle nudges to say, you can ask me to extract key points or generate a summary from this document to that effect. So there are so many ways with just that one card. If you consider how are the different ways you can make clear what the system can do. That is a very important thing to consider when you create AI solutions. Do not assume that the users are going to get it. If the users have to have their way, they would probably make their own sense of what the AI system is capable of doing, and that will not work out well for us. The second thing along that same lines is making clear how well the system can do what it can do. For example, when you give a response to a question, consider providing source citations. Hey, this is where I got my answers from. If you're familiar with Microsoft Copilot, it does a phenomenal job in this way. It always has citations and probably embedded annotations as well to clearly direct you, and it builds trust as well in your user. It tells you where this information came from. It also gives you capability disclaimers. AI generated answers can be wrong. Please review from your side. So that way, it shows that there is a certain responsibility that the user also has to take to vet the information, to review it, and human judgment is very much still in style in 2025, even when AI can do a lot of things. So it does not absolve us of our responsibility to do a bit. So it's very critical as we build AI systems to make sure that we clearly find ways to indicate what the system can do and how well it can do it. And about several years back, we wouldn't even consider thinking, putting a disclaimer to the effect of, I'm not really sure if you should be using the outputs of the system. I wouldn't trust this as much. But a lot of responsible AI developers and solutions these days do provide that friction in the user experience where they outright mention AI responses or AI generated responses can be inaccurate. Think about it. That's because they are implementing guidelines that like these, that they care to take that step in that product. So something for us also to be motivated by, to ensure that we manage expectations with our end users. All right. So moving us along. So those are some things to consider in the beginning of the interaction itself. Now, as we come along, now this is where, okay, we've set expectations. The user is in there using our AI product. Now, what do we do? During the interaction, some of the things that we can keep in mind. So again, going back to the example of an assistant itself, and consider this is a user who's looking, who's learning, who's interacting with your assistant. And let's say it's a voice-based assistant. So imagine that such a assistant can actually send out proactive messages to you. If you we've been so used to our smartphones these days, and it will send us notifications when we need it and when we don't need it as well. So consider an assistant that proactively sends you reminders when they are due. The first two guidelines in red, it asks that we be a little respectful of a person's immediate surroundings. So with proactive AI systems, it's important to think carefully about when and where people will likely be interacting with them. For example, if your users are likely to be attending to some critical tasks when using the system, do you think we should be sending them the untimely reminders? I mean, just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? For example, let me give you an example. So let's say an assistant is going to tell you, remember to call your mom for sure. That's great. I mean, I'd love that reminder. I don't know if I should be getting that when I am riding on a highway at great speed, right? So remember to call your mom is a great feature by itself, but if we are not aware of the context or the surroundings of the user, that may not prove to be very helpful. So understanding, so you can infer critical context and time services that are appropriate, so you know when to show relevant information. All of this, if you kind of think about it, this cannot be solved by UI alone. This is not just the job of the UI or the UX designer. So that's why we say, it takes a village to raise a child. So imagine you could ask your assistant for the fastest way home. I think a lot of us ask for the fastest way home. Usually our GPS assistants take that into consideration, and they do inform us of the fastest way home. Now, here's an interesting example from the research that was conducted. And if you read the paper, you'll see in most people did not recognize any potential for biases in this type of application except for one person. Our understanding of the fastest way home is very different. There's no way to set an average walking speed. There's a general assumption that it is the same for all users. That may not be the case. So there can be biases that are built into these applications if we are not careful about some of these. It was such an interesting insight and revelation. So some of the other ways in which we can make sure that these guidelines are implemented. So time services based on context. Offer a summary generation immediately after a document upload. So when, for example, in your assistant, if you have someone upload a document, have suggestions related to that document upload and not anything else, and do not give that suggestion anywhere else. So context relevant suggestions are very helpful to the user. And consider delaying any of that until the user really, really needs that help. It helps them to stay focused. So that's one example. Showing, again, contextually relevant information, knowing who you are interacting with and filtering down information to that particular user or that particular persona will be much well received. Like it depends on if I'm using the system or my child is using the system or someone else is using the system. Just like you have Netflix personas and things, the system is aware of who and what is happening so that they can tailor the experience specifically for you. Matching relevant social norms, knowing where your users are based out of, how or from where they are interacting, which time zones, which geographies, which locations, which cultures is critical for you to have a respectful experience with them. If you do not if you're not aware of the user's cultural setting, you might run the risk of not having inclusive language, perhaps. And then avoid making any sort of assumptions. This has to happen way from the training data itself. This is why we say that the data itself should be diverse, and it should be representative samples of the audience that you are going to interact with, so that any kind of biases in that data is not carried forward into the application. So mitigating social biases as well. So there's so many examples and ways in which we can use these cards to ensure that we have a very good and very respectful and responsible experience while during the interaction of a user with AI. The third lane there is when something goes wrong. And this is probably the most important lane, if I may, because honestly, I feel like the other two layers and the layers after also maybe is taken care of by a lot of teams today, practically. Like in production environments, when we build applications, those are inevitably taken care of by lieu of feature and functionality based driven requirements. But the third layer where, so when something goes wrong, that's not talked about as much, at least I feel. So, but the third layer is extremely critical because it's all about what you do when AI is inevitably wrong. So it's important to include those mechanisms to reduce the cost to the users when this happens. So if I may say that once again, it is to reduce the cost to the users when this happens. And when a mistake has happened, even with a human interaction, it's more about what you do about it and how you handle that mistake, as much as you might not be able to go back from it. Maybe the damage has been done, but reducing the cost, the impact to that is still critical. So this category is more about traditional AI model failures, but I think we can also take some inspiration from that towards generative AI failures. So let's take an example. Let's say that our model related errors that happen. Again, if you're familiar, there are different kinds or different categories under which these model errors can actually fall. There can be false positives, there are false negatives, and if each of these categories really have different impact. So for example, um, let's say you have an email client, and the email, the application, it has this capability to flag incoming emails as important and not important. Um, if it flags wrongly an email as important, or it flags wrongly an email as unimportant, is two different things. So the impact of a false positive and false negative, one will be way more costlier than the other. So here's how people have actually put this guideline into practice. If you look at it, even after the algorithm, the AI has had the capability to put it into the inbox and the junk folder. Let's take, for example, one of the earliest examples of AI, right? You have incoming emails that go into the inbox and the junk folder. If you look at it, there is still a mechanism that the user has control over. If I want, I can still move items out of my junk into some other folder, or out of my inbox into some other folder. So it is not that I am stuck with what the algorithm has decided for me. So that's one way to mitigate these errors. It might look very simple, but think about the level of thought that has gone into designing a feature of like that to, not close out the user. So you still want to provide people the ability to move emails from one to the other, or dismiss it, or either way. So at the very least, it's a good practice to provide access to an explanation of what just happened, or so people can understand why their AI is behaving that the way they are behaving. So this will hopefully help people use them more effectively in the future. It doesn't have to be very long explanations, no long documentation. People are not going to read any of that, but you get the idea. So this falls under the fact that support efficient invocation, support efficient dismissal, support efficient correction, scope services when in doubt, make clear why the system did what it did. We'll give you some other base, solid examples as well. So support efficient invocation. A lot of us use chat tools these days, Chat GPT, Perplexity, Claude, whatnot. So I love using the voice feature as much as I like text, probably a little more. And there are so many ways in which I can effectively invoke the assistant. I love the fact that sometimes there is autocomplete to help me, complete my sentence, and I don't have to type it all out. It just helps me to get going. So it's a very good way in which they have supporting effective invocation. Now, there are also ways in which they are supporting efficient dismissal. For example, I don't want to see something again. If you see in Instagram or in other sense, they show ads. They have to show ads. But if I don't want to see a particular kind of ad, I can still say, don't show this ad again. And maybe it's another site of ads, but at least I don't see that set of ads again. So there is a way that they have allowed users to effectively dismiss it. Excuse me. Third, on efficient correction. So if you enter something into the chatbot and you get a response, sometimes you are able to go back to your, excuse me, original request itself, edit it, and correct it instead of typing in your query all over again. That's one example. Another example is sometimes the AI, when it's not sure about what you just said, it can ask you validation questions. Did you mean X or Y? So that way, it helps you to correct or course correct what you actually meant. Clarify it, same thing when you clarify some things when services are not in doubt, services are in doubt. ChatGPT does this quite a lot, and make clear why the system did what it did. That reasoning step is, I think, very, very critical, and it helps build trust in that system. What people don't appreciate is a black box, and they don't feel like they have control over their destiny. When they feel like AI is making decisions for them that they don't understand or they don't have control over, that is when we start losing that experience. Even when AI has done something, it'll be a lot helpful when it explains or gives an option for the user to click, why did I get this, or why did, and if you see that there are, again, a lot of products out there that does this really, really well. Why did I get this recommendation? Why did I get this ad? So think about it. Those are because people have implemented guidelines like these in their products. So they're thinking about that up front, and it's not a feature bolt on or an add on at the end. So a lot of good examples of how these guidelines could be put into practice. People have put, product teams have put this into practice. The last line is, what do we do with changes over time? Okay, so my users have interacted with me, they've closed the application, but I still have an opportunity to do something about their interactions, learn from them potentially, right? So if you look at, I take an example of a social media situation. So you log into social media one fine evening and you start getting all these inspirational posts, and you wonder why. Most probably, you might have got one inspirational post and you must have clicked on that inspirational post, or you must have uh, engaged with it in some form or fashion. And the algorithm thought, you are so into inspirational posts. And before you know it, you have a whole feed of inspirational posts. And you do not have the second idea how to make it stop, why it happened. All attempts to redirect feed. Your feed is as good with all inspirational posts thereafter. So in the case of inspirational posts, now that's good at least. But what has really happened is that the system has learned from the user behavior, which AI is deemed to do. That's its nature. It is asked to learn from the experiences. It updated, it adapted, but not cautiously. So it did encourage granular feedback. For example, even in Instagram today, so it's users can like or dislike or can hide each individual post. I mean, there's no question about that at all. But it did not convey the consequences of the user's action. Like, did you know, if you when you would click that post, that this is going to be what the rest of your evening looks like? The user had no idea what action would lead to the flood of inspirational posts. Well, now that we know AI, we know what's going to happen, but then you get the idea. So these and other guidelines in this category show about how to ensure AI, the change over time, can do so in a way to preserve the user experience, because it could lead to frustrations, right? So here's a couple of ways in which we can deal with that. One, for sure, is remember recent interactions. Again, I have this problem always with some of my Gen AI assistants. I might have talked about something in the morning and then I ask something later on and it's still tied back into that conversation. And I'm not talking about that. I am way past that and I don't want you to take that. But in general, yes, they would want to remember recent conversations so that there is a thread that we continue. Learn from user behavior as well. Update and adapt cautiously is the word, not just update and adapt cautiously, especially bearing in mind your user's requirement. Encourage granular feedback. If Even when you have generative AI assistants, you'd see in every response, there is a thumbs up, thumbs down button. That way you get feedback. If you've not given feedback, I highly encourage you to give feedback. That will help us build more trustworthy AI solutions as well. I always do this in my conference as a quick show of hands. How many people have used ChatGPT? And that's about everybody in the audience. How many people have given feedback to ChatGPT? And that's a very few number of people. So I highly encourage you to provide, well, first of all, create solutions that will encourage granular feedback. And as a user, please provide granular feedback as well. Convey the consequences of users' action. So if you clear this chat, this is what is going to happen. If you do this, this is how it will impact my performance hereafter. So explain to the user the consequences of their actions and do not let them assume that this is what is going to or not going to happen, right? Provide global controls. Okay, here, this is very interesting. Most products or applications do provide global controls. It's just hidden. It doesn't serve the purpose when you've actually hidden it and people have no idea or no clue how to get to it. It's as good as not providing global controls in itself. So I've had multiple scenarios where I never knew that this global control really even existed at this solution unlike I read it through some forum or someone else told me about it. So provide accessible global controls, if I may. Last, I'd say notify users about changes. So if there is something new that happened in an application, a new feature which always comes out in the AI solutions, it's a new term, the users should not be surprised. That's the whole game. Like think about going to your doctor or your banker. You can do good news, you can do bad news. You don't want surprises, right? So notify users about changes so they can slowly come into your experience and do not, they're not surprised with what changed overnight. So that is about all with regards to all our guidelines. Oh, that was quite a bit, a lot of guidelines there. We covered at least 18 guidelines across multiple categories. And I'll say once again, from these guidelines, this is just a starter. From here, you could build these guidelines, take what matters to you, what is applicable to your solution. You could take it from there, take it into the workbook, as I was talking about when we started this solution, which is about the third component. People who use the workbook say it's a great way to align and talk about some things upfront, which I think eventually we will end up talking about. It's just going to be more reactively. We'd rather do it proactively, right? So when you start developing a feature itself, it's great to have to talk about how is this guideline applicable and how is it applicable? How might we make it applicable? So this whole guidelines and this workbook that we're talking about does not have to happen for net new products. So that's the good part about it. Even if you have something in production today, go back and take a look at the guidelines. Take a look at these cards and take a look at which of these are applicable to us. Am I doing a good job with regards to 15, 18, or 19? Can we do things differently? So it's a great exercise. But what I would say is bring the whole team together. It's not something that engineers or designers or data scientists should do in silos, because the true value in this is when everyone comes together and we are able to cover for each other's blind spots, and we're able to build this as a team. So I have a couple of screenshots of the workbook itself. If you look on the left line, you'll see these cards that are put together. You can pull these cards in. You can say which is applicable for your specific product. And then from there, so step one, you select the relevant guidelines. Maybe not all 18 are applicable to you. So you select which ones you really care about. And then step two, you imagine the impact of the relevant guidelines. Well, I applied this, what's going to happen? I did not apply this, what's going to happen? So that helps you prioritize and see which ones you really need to apply. And the step three is where you define, okay, I really want to take care of guideline 2. This is what I'm going to do about it. So you define your implementation requirements, and the rest you clear with it. You do t-shirt sizing and you bring it and you actually do what you have to do to implement, and then you track how well that guideline is going as well. So there's links to the guideline, there's links to the workbook, all available. It's all public material out there. If you go to Microsoft HAX Toolkit Guidelines Workbook, you can download that, start using it. So quick summary. Again, I go back to say, we don't know what we don't know. It's always good to have these guidelines challenge us, validate our assumptions, if not at least nudge us to ask, have you thought about this when you are developing the solution? Have you considered this aspect? Would it be possible that your users will interact in this way? How might we do this? Just good questions that the guidelines will ask us so that we can take care of some things proactively. So with that, I'd love to open it up for questions or comments. If anyone has used HAX Toolkit in the past, I'd love to learn from you. If anyone has additional comments or questions, we have a couple of minutes, but thank you to our sponsors once again. And I hope you have a great rest of the summit and the conference as well. Appreciate everyone's time and attention today. Thank you. And I will pause.